Billionaire's son was traumatized for 8 months. What the maid did that day changed everything. Some children laugh and play without a care in the world, but 7-year-old Marcus Blackwell hasn't spoken a single word in 8 months. Not since the night he watched his mother's car disappear into the darkness and never come back. In a mansion filled with silence, his billionaire father David drowns himself in work, believing money can fix what love cannot. But everything changes the day a new maid arrives. A woman with no fancy degrees, no expensive credentials, just a heart that refuses to give up. What she does that afternoon will shatter 8 months of silence and prove that sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest miracles. Stay with us because this story will remind you what truly matters. David Blackwell built his empire on precision. Every meeting calculated, every decision measured, every outcome controlled. But there was one thing his billions couldn't buy: his son's voice. Marcus had been silent for 243 days. David knew because he'd been counting the way you count the days after losing something precious, hoping the number might somehow bring it back. The boy sat in his usual spot by the massive living room window, knees pulled to his chest, staring out at the estate grounds. He looked so small against the floor-to-ceiling glass, like a ghost haunting his own life. "Sir?" David's assistant, Jennifer, stood in the doorway. "The new housekeeper is here for her first day." David barely looked up from his laptop. "Fine. Show her around. You know the rules: minimal interaction with Marcus. The last thing we need is another therapist wannabe making things worse." 3 housekeepers had quit in the past 2 months. They all said the same thing. "The house feels too heavy, Mr. Blackwell. Like sadness lives in the walls." Maybe it did. Since Sarah's accident, the 50-room mansion felt more like a mausoleum than a home. David had tried everything: child psychologists, trauma specialists, expensive retreats. Nothing worked. Marcus just disappeared inside himself. "Actually, sir," Jennifer hesitated. "This one's different. She specifically asked about Marcus, said she has experience with difficult situations." David's jaw tightened. "They all say that. Just keep her away from my son unless absolutely necessary." But as Jennifer's footsteps faded down the marble hallway, David found himself glancing toward Marcus. The boy hadn't moved in hours, hadn't eaten breakfast, hadn't acknowledged David's presence when he'd said goodbye that morning. What kind of father am I? The thought hit him like it did every day, sharp and unwelcome. He pushed it away, diving back into quarterly reports. Numbers made sense. Grief didn't. Emma Rodriguez had worked in a lot of homes, but none quite like this. The Blackwell mansion was stunning: crystal chandeliers, imported marble art worth more than most people's houses. But underneath all that beauty, she felt it immediately: the suffocating weight of loss. She'd been briefed about the family. Billionaire tech mogul, wife died in a car accident 8 months ago, 7-year-old son went mute afterward. Standard tragic story for the ultra-wealthy, except this felt different. Real. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" Jennifer appeared, clipboard in hand. "I'll show you the cleaning schedule. Kitchen first, then the east wing bedrooms. The west wing is off limits. That's where Mr. Blackwell's late wife's office was." As they walked through the house, Emma noted everything Jennifer didn't say. How they passed a family portrait with a white sheet draped over it. How Jennifer lowered her voice near certain rooms. How she completely avoided one hallway altogether. "And the little boy?" Emma asked. "Marcus?" Jennifer's expression grew cautious. "Mr. Blackwell prefers minimal staff interaction with his son. Marcus has been struggling since the accident. He doesn't speak, barely eats, just sits by that window all day." They passed the living room, and Emma caught her first glimpse of him. A small figure curled up against an enormous window, dark hair falling over his face. Her heart clenched. She'd seen that pose before, the way children folded in on themselves when the world became too much to bear. "Has anyone tried?" "Please," Jennifer interrupted firmly. "Mr. Blackwell has been very clear. Marcus sees specialists twice a week. That's enough." But as Emma began her work, she couldn't stop thinking about that little boy. She'd grown up with a younger brother who had autism, had worked with traumatized children at the community center back in her neighborhood. She recognized the signs a child so overwhelmed by loss that he'd simply shut down. Around noon, she was dusting the living room when she heard a soft thud from the window seat. Marcus had dropped something, a small wooden car painted red. Emma approached slowly like you would a wounded animal. "Oh, looks like you dropped this, sweetie." Marcus didn't look at her, but his fingers twitched slightly toward the toy. Emma sat down on the floor nearby, not too close, not threatening, and examined the car. "This is beautiful. Did someone special give it to you?" Silence. But Marcus glanced at her from the corner of his eye. "I bet it goes really fast," Emma continued, gently rolling the car on the coffee table. "My little brother had one just like this. He used to race it all around the house, driving our mama crazy with the noise." She made soft vroom sounds, nothing dramatic, just gentle play. Marcus's head turned slightly, the first movement she'd seen from him. "Would you like to show me how fast it goes?" Emma asked, offering him the car. For a moment something flickered in Marcus's eyes. His hand reached out halfway, then stopped. The moment shattered and he curled back into himself. Emma didn't push. She simply left the car within his reach and continued her work, humming softly. Some bridges took time to build. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma developed a routine. She'd clean around Marcus without forcing conversation, occasionally commenting on small things, the weather, a bird outside the window, the pretty colors in one of his mother's paintings that David hadn't taken down yet. Marcus never responded verbally, but Emma noticed the small signs. How he'd position himself so he could watch her work. How his toy car always ended up a little closer to where she'd been sitting. How he'd stop flinching when she moved around the room. David, meanwhile, remained a ghost in his own home. He left before Marcus woke up, returned after bedtime, and spent weekends locked in his office. The few times Emma encountered him, he was polite but distant, a man running from his own life. "How's he doing?" David asked one evening, finding Emma tidying the kitchen. "Marcus, he's present, aware. That's something." David's expression hardened. "The doctors say he may never speak again. Selective mutism following trauma can be permanent. Children are resilient, Mr. Blackwell. Sometimes they just need..." "What they need," David cut her off, "is professional help, not false hope from well-meaning staff." Emma bit back her response. She'd seen this before, parents so terrified of hoping that they'd rather accept defeat than risk another disappointment. But the next afternoon, something shifted. Emma was arranging fresh flowers in the living room when she heard a small gasp. Marcus was standing at the window, pressed against the glass, his body rigid with fear. Outside, 2 gardeners were trimming the large oak tree where a tire swing used to hang Sarah's addition to make the formal estate more kid-friendly. Marcus was shaking, making small distressed sounds in his throat. Hey, Emma said softly, moving toward him. "It's okay, sweetie. They're just cutting some branches." But Marcus was lost in the memory, reliving something terrible. Emma could see it in his face, the same look he'd probably had 8 months ago watching his mother's car disappear. Without thinking, Emma knelt beside him and began to sing. It was an old lullaby her own mother used to sing, soft and gentle in Spanish. "Duerme, mi niño, duerme ya, que la luna te cuidará. Cierra tus ojitos y sueña, que mañana será un nuevo día." Marcus's shaking slowed, his breathing deepened, and then, miracle of miracles, he leaned against her, just slightly seeking comfort. Emma wrapped her arms around him, gently continuing to sing until the gardeners moved away from the tree. When Marcus finally pulled back, there were tears in his eyes, but something else too. Recognition, trust. "Thank you," he whispered so quietly Emma almost missed it. The first words in 8 months. Emma wanted to tell David immediately, but something held her back. Marcus's breakthrough felt fragile, like a soap bubble that might burst if handled too roughly. She decided to wait to let the boy find his voice in his own time. Over the next few days, Marcus began speaking in whispers, just to Emma, just when they were alone. Simple things. "The bird is blue. I like that song. Is my daddy sad?" That last question broke Emma's heart. Of course, Marcus had noticed his father's distance. Children always did. "Your daddy loves you very much," Emma assured him. "Sometimes grown-ups have trouble showing it when they're hurting." Like how I couldn't talk. Exactly like that. But David remained oblivious, buried in work, avoiding the parts of the house where memories lived. Emma watched him becoming a stranger in his own home, and it made her angry. This little boy needed his father, not another stranger in a suit. The confrontation came on a Friday afternoon. David arrived home early to find Emma and Marcus in the kitchen baking cookies. Marcus was laughing, actually laughing at Emma's impression of a grumpy flour bag. "What is this?" David's voice was cold professional. "We're making snickerdoodles," Emma said calmly. Marcus remembered they were his mom's favorite. "I specifically said minimal interaction." Marcus immediately went quiet, sensing the tension. Emma saw the walls going back up, the progress threatening to disappear. "Mr. Blackwell, maybe we could talk privately. There's nothing to discuss. You're overstepping your boundaries. I need someone who follows instructions, not someone who thinks they can play therapist with my son." "Daddy?" Marcus's voice was barely audible, but it cut through the tension like a bell. David froze. Jennifer gasped from the doorway, where she'd been standing with some papers. "Daddy, please don't be mad at Emma. She's nice to me." David's face went white. 8 months of silence, and his son chose this moment, this argument, to speak again. "Marcus," David's voice cracked. You're talking." "I've been talking to Emma for 3 days, Marcus said, growing bolder. "She sings to me like Mommy did. She doesn't try to fix me. She just sits with me." David looked between his son and Emma, understanding dawning in his eyes. All the expensive specialists, all the professional interventions, and it was their housekeeper who had reached his boy. "I'm sorry," Marcus continued, tears starting. "I'm sorry I stopped talking. I'm sorry I made you sad. I miss Mommy so much, and I didn't know how to say it." David crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and pulled his son into his arms, both of them crying now. "You don't have to be sorry, buddy. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have been here. I should have—" "It's okay, Daddy. Emma says sometimes people need time to find their voices again. Even grown-ups." Over Marcus's head, David met Emma's eyes. The gratitude there was overwhelming, mixed with shame and wonder and a dozen other emotions. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Emma just nodded quietly, slipping out to give father and son the privacy they needed for their own conversation. 6 weeks later, the Blackwell house felt different. Not because Emma had rearranged anything, or because David had bought new furniture. It felt different because it was alive again. Marcus chattered constantly now, making up for months of silence. He told David about his dreams, his fears, his memories of Sarah, and David slowly, carefully learned to listen, to be present, to parent not just with his wallet, but with his heart. "Emma," Marcus asked one afternoon as they worked in Sarah's old garden together. David had suggested turning it into a memorial space, somewhere beautiful to remember her. "Yes, sweetie. Do you think Mommy would be happy that I'm talking again?" Emma smiled, brushing dirt from his cheek. "I think your Mommy would be proud of how brave you've been, and I think she'd be especially happy that you and your daddy are taking care of each other now." David appeared around the corner home from work at a reasonable hour for the first time in months. "How are my gardeners doing?" "Daddy, look." Marcus held up a small seedling. "Emma says these will be sunflowers just like the ones Mommy planted." "Just like them?" David agreed, kneeling beside his son. He looked at Emma over Marcus's head. "Emma, I need to ask you something." Marcus looked between them, suddenly worried. "You're not firing Emma, are you?" David laughed, the first genuine laugh Emma had heard from him. "Actually, I was going to ask if she'd consider staying permanently. Not as a housekeeper, as family." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that you saved my son. I'm sure that you helped me remember how to be a father. And I'm sure that this house is a home again because of you." Marcus jumped up and hugged Emma tightly. "Please stay. We need you." "I'm not going anywhere," Emma promised, hugging them both. As the 3 of them worked in Sarah's garden, planting new life in soil that had seemed barren, David realized something profound. Love wasn't about having all the answers or being perfect. It wasn't about money or professional help or avoiding pain. Love was about showing up, about sitting in the silence until someone was ready to speak, about building trust one small gesture at a time. His son had found his voice again, but more importantly, David had found his way back to being a father. And it had all started with a woman who understood that sometimes the most powerful healing happens not in doctors' offices or therapy sessions, but in kitchens and gardens and quiet moments between people who refuse to give up on each other. 8 months of trauma hadn't disappeared overnight, but it had been transformed into something else. A new beginning built on the unshakable foundation of love, patience, and the courage to hope again. Sometimes the most expensive solutions can't fix what matters most. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to sit in the darkness until the light returns. And sometimes that person comes disguised as someone society might overlook: a housekeeper with no degrees, but an unlimited capacity for love. Marcus had taught them all something precious, that healing doesn't happen on anyone's timeline, but its own, and that the most profound transformations often begin with the smallest acts of kindness. What did this story mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've ever experienced the power of simple kindness in dark times, let us know. Your story might inspire someone else. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories that remind us what truly matters in life.